how do we do better sense making, those epistemics can be weaponized. And we can talk about how critical thinking and how dialectics and whatever can be weaponized. But insofar as it's also talking about not just what is true, but what is good, right? Like in the true, the good, and the beautiful kind of sense, what is the kind of world we're wanting to build? Then, of course, any virtue can be weaponized, which is virtue signaling. And again, I'm talking about topics that everybody's talking about right now. I'm just hopefully trying to talk about them in a slightly different way to say everyone on all sides are oriented to do versions of this, as opposed to those guys are virtue signaling, and us calling them out is us demonstrating our actual virtue, but we're not virtue signaling. And so one way that I think of the distinction between real virtue and virtue signaling is virtue signaling is when it's clear that enough people hold a particular trait as a virtue that if I seem to have that virtue, it would be good for me, right? The people would like me, accept me, agree with me, buy my stuff, like my ideas, whatever it is. So if I signal, if I communicate in some way that I have that virtue, it's beneficial for me in straight self-serving ways, right? So I have a reason to signal the virtue beyond my authentic living of it. And this is where, rather than I'm just doing what I'm doing and people notice the virtue that I happen to be living, I am intentionally trying to seem virtuous of a particular kind more than I am trying to actually live that thing, right? And this is where Jesus saying, don't let the right hand see what the left hand was doing. And I think every culture that has wisdom has some quotes like that, because virtue signaling is forever, right? And it's whatever the dominant culture is, whatever the thing that is seen as virtue there. So during the early Soviet empire Marxist ideology, people would virtue signal being more Marxist, right? And during Dark Age Catholic reign, the virtue signaling was about being better Catholics. And so now left and right have their own versions of virtue signaling to their own base. And so politicians and companies and social leaders are oriented to signal the thing that they would need to in that way. A real virtue is something that I care about, that I value. Actually, hopefully, something that is sacred to me. That I am willing to experience personal sacrifice for. Not that my signaling of it creates personal gain, but I am willing to lose personal gain in service of this because it's more important than personal gain to me. So I'm willing to lose some dollars to have my company not do that thing because I hold a virtue or an ethic that won't have me do that thing even if it would make me more dollars. Or I'm willing to lose some followers or get some people disliking what I'm saying or whatever to stand up for something because I actually meaningfully believe in it, right? Most people are willing to be disliked by the group that they identify as enemies. They might even take pride in it because they're doing in-group, out-group, Machiavellian stuff. But am I willing to lose likes and support by the people that I'm trying to in-group with is where it's actually consequential, because losing the ones that I've already lost isn't consequential. So then I get to weaponize, see, I'm willing to make a sacrifice and have enemies, which is actually weaponizing the idea of sacrifice itself. We can also see that, the difference between virtue and virtue signaling is real virtue is not trying to signal to other people something. It is trying to actually live something, and it is willing to stand for something where it is personally disadvantageous. And so you can see someone's virtue in the series of choices they have made that have been hard choices. So when someone tells me that they're interested in impact investing with their financial services fund, I go through and I say, show me in record the series of investment choices you made where you turn down money because of an ethic. Just show me the record of those. And usually they can't do a good job at that because I know that now impact investing just happens to be the virtue that signals a particular niche of capital or whatever, but there's no real earnestness in it.